Donald doesn't think long into the future. He is if to any extent that he's a thinker, it's tactical, it's not strategic. And he's also, by the way, flatly said in the past, who cares what happens after you're dead?
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of The Making of Donald Trump, David Cay Johnston, joins me now. Good afternoon, David.
Hello, Jane.
Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. David, what do you make of the president's current approach to the war between Russia and Ukraine? He had quite a lot to say about Volodymyr Zelensky today.
Well, Donald's view of the world is that might makes right. And in fact, the U.S. government last Thursday night quietly put out its latest national security statement, and it is about going back to a system of great powers with satellites and subordinate powers that have to do with the great powers say. And it's also, though not relevant perhaps to this, explicitly white supremacist. So Donald very much, has an affinity for the Russians who have been courting him for 4 decades. And the plan he's putting forward right now, of course, is largely a Russian plan.
Yeah, it's certainly been very well received by Russia, hasn't it, this national security strategy?
Well, I think there's a reason for that, Jane, and that is it's in the interests of Vladimir Putin to simply extend this, to say, well, we'll talk, we'll meet, because this is a war of attrition. And over a long slog, incompetent as the Russian military has proved to be, and despite enormous casualties on the battlefield, over the long haul, Russia will be able to wear down Ukraine. So this is just another stalling tactic so they can continue this war of aggression and attrition.
I mean, it does seem when you look at Donald Trump's sort of behaviour in terms of, who he's kind of trying to have conversations with, that he makes up his mind kind of based on the last person he spoke to.
Yeah, Donald is absolutely notorious for the last person he talked to. And the reason for that is that Donald, and I've known him for almost 40 years, is unbelievably, appallingly ignorant. When Putin says that Russia is the mother country here, and the fact is that 1,000 years ago, Kyiv was a thriving city and Moscow was 2 or 3 huts out in the forest, Donald doesn't know any of that, and he doesn't care. In Donald's mind, when he conjures up something, that's the way it is. And Jane, if you don't accept that, well, you're fake news.
It is very interesting, though, isn't it, David? Because, I think most of us remember Donald Trump saying he didn't want to get involved in foreign wars. He didn't want that for America. And yet here we are. But on that note, Donald Trump is heading to Pennsylvania tomorrow for his first rally in 5 months. David, what do you see as his motivations in that?
Well, Donald's MAGA base is fracturing. We saw Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene leave, and what did she leave over? It's Trump's opposition to continuing tax credits so that roughly 17 million poor Americans will continue to have some access to health care under the Affordable Care Act that was put forth by President Barack Obama. And in addition, his refusal to come clean about the Epstein files has created another fracture within the MAGA movement. And essentially, you're seeing this movement break up into pieces based on people's interests. And of course, MAGA is a movement largely of very poorly educated people with minimal critical thinking skills. They deeply hold and believe in things, whether they really understand them or not. And when Trump says, I'll end the war in a day, the war in Ukraine or the one in Gaza, and he can't do it, when he says, I'll release all the Epstein files, and then he doesn't do it, those things, together with the practical effect that we're seeing rural hospitals and medical facilities close, and many people facing a doubling, tripling, quadrupling, even quintupling of their cost for healthcare to where they can't afford it. Those things are creating real problems within the Making America Great Again movement.
And aside from just the healthcare costs, as you say, I mean, just the general cost of living in America is really stubbornly refusing to come down, isn't it? I mean, the president's blaming it all on the Biden administration. He's also claiming that petrol and eggs are now going down, and that proves that he's got a more successful economic strategy. I mean, is putting on a show in Pennsylvania, having one of these rallies, really going to convince people that he is bringing down the cost of living? Does it help shore up flagging support for someone in Donald Trump's position?
Yeah, this will be a real test because it's possible he will be booed at this rally, which he's never been. He's been booed in many places, baseball stadiums, football stadiums, and the like. And it's possible that will happen here. Donald has always used these rallies to focus attention where he wants it and draw support. On the other hand, what people generally haven't seen is that many times these rallies had relatively small crowds. There were lots of empty seats, and anybody who pointed a camera to the empty seats, security would quickly rush out of the building. I actually got reporters working for me at DC Report to get film like that by shooting selfies with people, in which you then could see in the background all the empty seats. But how big the crowd is and how enthusiastic they are will be quite an interesting insight into the MAGA movement. On the other hand, if you just look at the recent voting results, including 1 week ago in Tennessee, Trump's movement is clearly not solidly behind him. They're not turning out. A congressional district that he had won by 22 points, the Republican won, but only by 9 points. And that means every congressperson who's a Republican has to be worried about what's going to happen to them in November of next year.
Well, on that note, David, I mean, the US is already turning its attention to next year's midterms. How much of an issue will the cost of living be in those elections?
I think it's going to be a huge issue. And the fact that Trump has shut down a number of the basic statistical indicators for the country is not helping him. He doesn't want to hear the bad news, so he just says, we're not going to have this data available. And I don't think you can trust it either at this point, unfortunately. You have to look at it the way we do data from the Russian Statistical Ministry and from China as not reliable. But cost of living is a critical issue with many, many Americans. If you're in the top 10% in America, it's at best and most an annoyance. But for the vast majority of Americans, these are really crucial issues. You know, Donald claimed the other day that I've lowered drug prices 1,500%. I've yet to find a drug company paying me for the medications my doctor has me on.
Just beyond next year's midterm elections, just looking ahead to 2028, David, do we think Donald Trump really cares about succession? I mean, it seems to be very much the Donald show. He doesn't seem to be necessarily nominating an obvious successor at the moment. Do we think that, the MAGA movement may end with Trump?
I don't know the MAGA movement will end. I mean, after all, we're seeing all around the world people going around and saying Hitler was right, and Hitler's been dead now for more than 80 years. I think that movement will stay, particularly the racist elements that are the underlying core of that movement. But I also think that the Republicans have done themselves a disfavor. They are redistricting in Texas and some other states to eliminate what they think of as Democratic elected districts. The problem is that they're narrowing the margins in the solidly, overwhelmingly Republican districts. And what we saw in Tennessee tells us that that's actually an opportunity for the Democrats to win a lot of those districts because of unhappiness with Trump. Donald doesn't think long into the future. He is to any extent that he's a thinker, it's tactical, it's not strategic. And he's also, by the way, flatly said in the past, who cares what happens after you're dead?
Fair enough. Thank you so much, David, for your time this afternoon. That is David Cay Johnston, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of The Making of Donald Trump.